Good morning, everyone. My name is Vito Scutari. I'm a junior at King's School, and today I'm going to be talking about my project, which is the Comprehensive Assessment for Executive Dysfunction, or CADE for short. Just as some background first, traumatic brain injuries, or TBIs for short, affect a staggering number of people. In the US alone, over 1 million people suffer from a TBI each year. That's about one person every 30 seconds. Out of these cases, around 230,000 end up in ICU, and tragically, around 50,000 die every year as a result of their injuries. But what's even more concerning is that many who survive never fully recover. Right now, there are around 5.5 million Americans living with TBI-related disabilities. Additionally, TBI affects a wide range of people, everyone from car accident victims to athletes, especially in high-contact sports like football or hockey, and even military personnel and veterans. Something that's also very important to consider are the long-term effects of TBI, which not only affect the patient, but the friends and family who surround them. One of the most significant of these effects impacts something called executive function, which leads me to clarify what that is. So, executive functions are the higher level cognitive processes, including memory, planning, and organization, as well as some others which you can see on the image to the right, which are essential for problem solving, decision making, and goal setting. They are basically what allow us to go through our day-to-day lives. Now, imagine losing those abilities. This is unfortunately the reality that patients with TBI experience every day. For someone with a TBI, even simple tasks like following a recipe, managing a budget, or organizing their day become frustrating and difficult, severely impacting their daily lives. So how do we currently assess these impairments? Traditionally, executive dysfunction is assessed using standardized tests. However, due to the paper and pencil or verbal nature of these tests, they are often costly and time-consuming. Additionally, they are very prone to human error and bias because the results are largely up to the doctor's interpretation of the patient's behavior. Just as a quick example of how a normal test would look like, first, the patient would be given a paper screening questionnaire that asks them basic questions about themselves, as well as their TBI, including when it happened and how it happened. Then, this would be followed by niche tasks, such as drawing a clock. Which leads me into my next point, which is that the results often don't reflect how patients will function in everyday life. Additionally, they are often repetitive and disengaging, which is a huge issue since around 80% of patients with TBI suffer from attention deficits as a result of their injuries. So, what if we can make assessments not only more engaging, but also more effective? That's where gamification comes in. Gamification means integrating game-like elements into serious applications, and this approach is already showing major benefits. By turning cognitive assessments into interactive experiences, we can boost patient engagement by making tests feel more like a game. This also reduces test anxiety and fatigue for patients as well. And due to the virtual nature of gamified approaches, we can gather more objective data through in-game tracking, leading to better diagnoses. Some real-world examples of gamified approaches include Duolingo, which gamifies the process of learning a new language, and EndeavorRx, which can be seen on the bottom image, which is the first FDA-approved video game designed to treat ADHD in children. And the goal with CADE is to apply the same innovative approach to TBI assessment. So what is CADE? The Comprehensive Assessment for Executive Dysfunction, or CADE for short, is a tablet-based clinical evaluation tool. But from the patient's perspective, it functions largely like a game in order to keep the patient engaged. CADE is made up of multiple scenarios where instead of answering questions on a piece of paper, patients complete real-life tasks in a virtual environment. Patients' behavior within these scenarios, such as what decisions they make and how long they take, will be tracked and then given to doctors in a report for them to base their conclusions off of. Additionally, this report will also include the patient's answers to the screening questionnaire that will be built into CADE, which patients must fill out prior to going through the scenarios. So how did I develop CADE? The first step in CADE's development was its design. First, all scenarios were outlined, including what steps the patient must take to complete them and what executive functions should be tracked within them. This was done to make implementing the scenarios within Unity, the game development engine chosen, simpler later on. Additionally, concept art, an example of which can be seen on the top image, as well as diagrams outlining CADE's software architecture, which can be seen in the bottom image, were created so that I knew how CADE should look, feel, and function before developing the software. Furthermore, 3D models were created for all objects and characters within CADE, and then 2D textures were created to put on top of those 3D models in order to make CADE as visually appealing as possible for patients. CADE's map was then designed and built within Unity as well. And to date, the tutorial and sandwich shop scenarios have been fully implemented and tested within Unity. Now, I mentioned that diagrams were created outlining the software architecture, so I'm just going to dive a little deeper into that now. CADE software functions through a couple basic systems that include the player movement system, the interaction system, the to-do list system, the inventory system, and the camera system. Firstly, the player movement system was designed to function in two different ways. The first of which being through keyboard input, which allowed me to test CADE on the fly as I was developing it. The second one being the one that the patients will utilize, which is through the on-screen joystick, which can be seen in the bottom left of the top image, as I did mention that CADE is tablet-based. CADE's interaction system allows the patient to interact with the world around them. This includes picking up and using items, as well as talking to non-playable characters, or NPCs for short, within CADE. And just to put NPCs into simpler terms, they are basically the characters in the world that the patient can interact with. And when the patient goes to interact with one of these NPCs, they will be prompted with dialogue, which is facilitated by Yarn Spinner, a Unity dialogue tool used by many mainstream video games. And once they get this dialogue, the patient will read what the NPC says to them, and then be given response choices which simulate real-world interactions. CADE's to-do list system, which you can see in the top image, gives the patient a list of steps that they must take in order to complete the scenario that they are currently in. As the patient completes these steps, the to-do list will also update to reflect that. CADE's inventory system works in tandem with the interaction system that I mentioned earlier to allow the patient to store the items that they pick up in their backpack, which can be seen in the bottom image, for use at a later time throughout the scenario. CADE's camera system has two different points of view. The first of which being on the left, which is the default camera, which is a third-person perspective positioned behind the patient's character that allows the patient to see a large portion of the world around them. However, when they go to interact with an NPC, as I mentioned earlier, the camera will be switched to a more over-the-shoulder perspective, which can be seen in the image to the right, which not only allows the patient to see themselves and the character they're talking to, but it leaves enough on-screen space for the dialogue text boxes to appear without obstructing the view of the world. As I mentioned, to date, all scenarios have been outlined, and the tutorial and sandwich shop scenarios have been fully implemented. So the next steps include fully implementing the rest of the scenarios within Unity, and then thorough internal testing will be conducted. And based on this, CADE will be refined in order to make sure that everything is ready for clinical trials. Then, CADE will be given to doctors so that they can test it with patients with TBI and establish CADE's usability in the real world. Now, you may be wondering what CADE's impact will be in these clinical settings. So, once deployed, CADE is expected to revolutionize the way that executive dysfunction is assessed in TBI patients. By integrating technology into healthcare, CADE's gamified nature will enhance patient engagement, something that is especially crucial, as I mentioned, that most patients with TBI suffer from attention deficits as a result of their injuries. Additionally, due to its tablet-based nature, CADE has the potential for remote cognitive assessments, as well as faster and more efficient assessments. Since CADE also collects quantitative data about patients' executive functions, assessments will be more objective and more precise, leading to better long-term rehabilitation outcomes for patients. Now, CADE is especially important because, as I mentioned, TBI is something that affects millions of people. And it's not just the patients that it affects. Since patients are often impaired to the point where they cannot function individually, family members or friends often have to step in to take care of them. Additionally, it takes a very heavy mental toll on those around the patients to see them in their impaired states. This leads me into why I am personally very passionate about creating CADE. Something that I am in general really passionate about is helping people through technology. And Cade has the potential to do exactly that by combining technology and healthcare.
2-minute warning.
Thank you. For example, one of my close friends, Steven, was told at the beginning of this year that he could no longer play football, which is the sport that he's grown up playing, because he has sustained too many concussions and it would be a risk to his safety to continue playing. Now, had Cade been available when he sustained his first concussion, he could have received better and more personalized treatment, allowing him to limit the TBI's effects on him. With that said, I would like to dedicate my work to my friend Steven and thank my mentors, Dr. Toole and Dr. Cruz at Sacred Heart University, as well as my teacher, Dr. Schulman at King's School. I thank you for your time and I open the floor up to any questions you may have.